All right, all right. Good day, ladies and gentlemen. Hope everybody's doing well. Good evening. This is actually one of my latest live streams that I've done. But before I keep on talking, I want to pass it on to Doug Piper because actually this is an important day. We're doing a really cool collaboration. So I'm passing the basketball court or basketball ball to Mr. Doug Piper.
Well, you better be careful who you give things to. Well, welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us because this is going to be a unique and very special treat tonight as we have the opportunity to have a food fight. Yeah, a new theme for us. And tonight it's going to be on rum and beer. So I thought that would be a lot of fun. And the first thing I want to do is introduce you to my new friend, Fede Hernández. Now, Fede is with the Rum Lab, and he organizes rum festivals all around the nation. He does weekly interviews with news and all about the rum industry. We also have another special guest who we will hopefully have on screen shortly, but he's not there at the moment. So that will be a surprise when he's there. And we have a couple of cool things we're going to do. I've got an unusual beer, and we're going to try an experiment. You know, guys know I love to do experiments. Well, this will be the first time I've gotten to light something. So we'll see how that goes.
Well, hopefully you don't light your house away and we miss you, Doug, okay?
That would be a bummer.
And we also have another good, awesome guest, which is my friend Matt Pietrek. He's actually one of the persons that introduced me here to Seattle. He does not live in Seattle anymore. He's wandering around the world, but now he lives in New Orleans. And he's an amazing writer. It's like, just look for the CocktailWonk or Matt Pietrek, and you'll see everything around all the amazing, like in-depth stories and articles that he talks about rum and other spirits as well. Matt, if you can say hello and if you can introduce yourself, that would be phenomenal.
Right. Hello. Thank you, Fede. It's an honor to be here. Not my first time on Zavvi, actually. I do a bi-weekly show with Zavvi, which includes Fede as one of the co-founders. I do a bi-weekly show where we talk to the various rum producers of the West Indies Rum and Spirits Producers Association. And I host that with Fede's co-Zavvi person, Will Hokenga. So as Fede said, I'm a writer, educator, and historian, and always excited to talk about rum. So glad to be here.
I'm really envious. So like Doug Piper has a really cool background, like all these barrels, and I imagine there are beer aging barrels. And then Matt Pietrek has this awesome shelf to his left side with tons of booze. I just have like, bam! Oh, that's like, oh my God.
That's the everyday stuff. The good stuff's upstairs.
Oh my God!
Wow.
Yeah.
I want Matt's background.
Matt, are you sure you're not right now at Total Wine and Spirits? And you just
no, I have more.
But as Matt was saying, we're a platform called Savvy, and we're very excited to be co-hosting and co-working today with Gourmet Brewing, which we have all those followers out there that are watching us right now. And Doc has done a phenomenal job in Crowdcast with all his followers and in-depth conversations about beer as well. But you know what? Today we're in a food battle, and let's get ready to rumble because I want to start talking about beer versus rum. So that we have a couple things that we want to start with. First of all, Doug Piper has some images. First, a beer that he wants to introduce, and he also has he wants to light something on fire. I don't know if he's going to do it right now, but it's like, Doug, you let us know. We'll follow through.
Well, it may be, it might be where Matt is talking about the rum. Might be a better spot to do that. Just wherever you think makes sense.
All right. So I think best of all, let's start talking about ingredients, right? And Doug, if you can tell the audience, I'm sure all your audience knows, but my audience doesn't know, maybe, I'm sure they do too. What are the key ingredients for beer?
Well, as they say, and in all of the Cicerone classes and all the BJCP classes, the primary ingredient is water. Second to that is barley. And barley, of course, being a grain similar to wheat, but the difference is it is as if it was bred for brewing beer. It has all the enzymes and all the unique characteristics to produce beer. The next ingredient is hops. And then hops, of course, came later in history, I think around the 12th or 13th century, but beer prior to that time really didn't have hops. And of course, they didn't know until about 200 years ago that yeast was another key ingredient. So those are the four key ingredients that all go into beer. And the only other thing is there are various additions. They call them adjuncts. They can be added to the beer to give different characteristics to the beer. But for the most part, it's a barley-based beverage.
And Matt, can you explain the key ingredients of rum?
Sure. So like Doug said, obviously water is a part of it, but actually I'm going to back up a little bit and just talk more about distilled spirits in general. They all come from various organic sources. Like every distilled spirit eventually comes from sugar, be it a whiskey, a rum, brandy. They all come from different, basically like farm plants, if you will, and they at some point get turned into sugar. So, for example, the barley, when it's malted and then later cooked, essentially, that releases the sugars in there, which can then be fermented. Rum is specifically from cane, from sugar cane. So it's not from sugar beet, or it's not from sugar. It's specifically sugar cane and things that come from sugar cane. The most prevalent one being, of course, molasses. So basically all rums, or all spirits start out sort of like beer, in that you take something and you add water to it and ferment it, and it creates alcohol at a particular level. Distilled spirits, however, take that and then run it through a still and raise the alcoholic strength and concentrate the flavors even more.
Very cool. I have to say, I used to be a beer drinker. I am now a rum drinker, but I love them both. I appreciate there's a moment for every single spirit in the world, right? And there's not a moment that I'm like, when it's really hot, I still have it in my mind. I worked out, or I carry a lot of cases or something. I'm like, oh, I need a beer. And that is like still a natural instinct in my mind. But as a Puerto Rican, the rum is always there for me.
You're morally obligated.
I am morally, yes, 100%. It's I don't want my mother to kick me out of the house. Well, she did 22 years ago, but all right. So, Doug, do you know when beer was discovered?
Well, they think brewing is the second oldest work that was out there, profession. So we all know what the first one is. So, and they really, if you go back and talk to historians, and we just had one on last week, they believe that literally, and this is not a joke. A lot of people look at it as a joke, but they really felt like beer was one of the things that created what we call civilized people. And that is people who are not nomadic and people who tend to stay in one place and grow crops. And so the thought is, in the very early days of man, when they discovered beer, probably accidentally, they thought, well, that grass seed is pretty good in that water, especially after it sits for a little while. Let's try and grow that grass seed again and they started to guard that spot, and they stayed in that spot. And before long, you know, they were beginning to defend that spot because that had really good grass seed. And
Yeah.
so then why be nomadic? Because you don't want to run off without your grass seed.
Well, that's why there's a book called The History of the World in 6 Classes. And the first alcoholic beverage that it talks about is beer. And exactly what you're saying, like people were nomad, they were moving around from place to place. And then like accidentally they found, they saw that wheat, water, natural yeast was creating some type of booze. And then, and they're like, whoa, I like this. And this is a way that they're like, we should not move. We should not keep on walking. We should just stay here and grow this more. So I don't know if it's interesting. It's quite interesting for those who have been able to read that book, A History of the World in 6 Classes.
Yeah, I think one of the most interesting things is they really believe, I guess, depending on which historian you talk to, that the thing that powered the building of the pyramids in Egypt was beer and bread. And they really don't feel like it was necessarily done with slave labor, because the breweries that they found and the bread making is so first rate. They don't think it was necessarily the slaves who were doing the building. Now, the slaves might have been doing other things, but apparently there was a lot of good beer and a lot of good bread around the pyramids.
Interesting. Well, so this is a natural question for Matt Pietrek, because I consider him like a rum historian. Matt, when was rum said to be discovered?
Well, it depends on who you ask, context. If you were to say when was the first sugar cane spirit created, you could actually go back to, I believe it's Southeast Asia, maybe India. David Wondrich has written about that. If you want to talk about like rum as we define it today, you could say that the first sugar cane itself, which was not indigenous to the Caribbean, came over from the Canary Islands. In fact, we believe that the first instance of sugarcane arriving in the Caribbean basin was from Columbus's second voyage in 1498. He brought sugarcane, and I believe left it on the island of Hispaniola. It didn't take long for it to spread from there, and one of the first sort of large-scale sugar production or sugarcane growing enterprises was in Brazil, what we would call modern-day Brazil. We know that at some point Brazil, basically, Brazil was populated by the Portuguese and later the Dutch. You know, at some point they had distillation in there. So some people say it was as early as 1532 that the first cane wine, if you will, was distilled into something like a distilled spirit. And you might call that cachaça, because Brazil's cane spirit is cachaça. It's not rum. Some people say they're the same thing. Other people think they're culturally different. We won't get into that here. But basically, distillation in the New World, South America, was as early as 1532. In terms of rum today, like Caribbean rum, or you could say there was a Caribbean rum distillery, that would have been around 1640 or so. That's one of the main beliefs, is that people who are in Brazil, in particular the Dutch and perhaps some Sephardic Jews who were fleeing from Brazil from the Portuguese, who had sort of reasserted control, that they fled from Brazil and wound up on Barbados, which is one of the more southernmost islands of the Caribbean. I think it is thus, well, not counting Trinidad, is a very much easternmost island, if I remember correctly. But anyhow, they believe that the Dutch and the Sephardic Jews made their way to Barbados, but there's also some indication that some of the Barbados people had gone to Brazil to learn sugar making as well. So we don't really have a great conclusive story, but there's several different ones. They all point to sugarcane and knowledge of distillation emigrating to Barbados from Brazil in around 1640 or so, and then from there it really took off.
Okay, so for sure, I think the first point goes to beer being the oldest beverage in the world. So for sure, I think
The Indonesian, like we don't know, like it's all how far you want to dig back in the history book, and did somebody bother to write it down? So
not true, but we know about nomads drinking beer. We never heard anything about nomads drinking rum. So we have to give this point to Dog Piper and beer. It's okay.
All right.
It's okay.
All right, I'm writing that down. Got it here. And Fede, you might keep an eye out. I think our other guest is about to join.
Oh, excellent. Doug, do you know what some of the names that beer has had in the very beginning? Today it's called beer, right? Or birra, but what was the first initial names that it had?
I don't know that one, Fede. I should have asked Travis Rupp when he was here. I know I've heard him refer a lot to like Cerveso, a lot like that, and Cerveso-like things. But no, I don't know that one. But I can get that one because I know the guy to ask.
I think, Matt, right? If I'm not mistaken, the first names that rum had was Rumbullion, Kill Devil.
There were several different names floating around from that era. Also, I believe Tafia, Gildiv, which I believe was like the Dutch equivalent of Kill Devil. Several different rums or names floated around from that era. There's several different theories as to which one evolved into rum as we know it today.
Now, Kill Devil, that's interesting.
Right.
Does that have any relationship to Kill Devil Hills in North Carolina, which is Kitty Hawk?
So yeah, I believe that that name passed around to different things. Unfortunately, I haven't traced that particular etymology down. Somebody like Wayne Curtis, who wrote "And a Bottle of Rum," would be able probably to tell you a lot more.
Yeah. Well,
Gary Fuller has put in the chat Sela. And Gary, I guess you're referring to the beer name. Hopefully you are. Celia.
Sela. Interesting. I know from that book from Wayne Curtis, it was said that it was called Kill Devil because they thought that if you drank it, you'll get all the bad spirits out of your body and it'll help you remove sickness as well. So it was like a spiritual moment.
Right. Yeah, I think that meets my recollection. It's been a while since I referred to that particular text, but I believe you.
Yeah, I like that though.
I still refer as Kill Devil. My wife's like, "Stop drinking the Kill Devil, Fede." No, I'm kidding.
Well, I'm glad you explained that because I was wondering what Kill Devil had anything to do with it, but it was like a purification.
Yeah, a purification. The same thing. Like there's a lot of cocktails in the world are based on a medicine structure or something that had to do a botanical thing that was going to help the society with something, right? I know, for example, mojito. It comes from the name mojo, and then it was a Latino Caribbean things, and it was like something to cure. And now we drink it to celebrate, which is great.
And I would add, for example, like, if you think there's old medicines and things, they would use tinctures of like, very concentrated compounds, and that sort of fell into cocktails as well. Like our bitters or you could be thought of the form 100%. Of a tincture. Yeah.
Well, bitters were 100%. Angostura started as a medicine in the town of Angostura, Venezuela. Right?
Correct. Yeah. 1824, if I remember. Yeah, 1824. Yes.
Go Matt.
Yeah.
Hey, Doc, I came prepared. I brought Matt.
I see that. Better than I did.
He makes sure that everything that I said, he'll fix it just in case I say anything that makes no sense. He'll for sure make it look good or say, because he knows I'm still learning here. Or it's not that I'm learning. I just forget. That's my problem.
Jeremy says cocktail. I guess the word cocktail was originally medicinal.
Oh, wow. Makes sense.
I did always wonder where that came from.
Yeah, there's again several theories around that. David Wondrich explored that in his book Imbibe, and I think one of them had to do with like a cock's tail, like basically like they would take a plume from a cock, like a rooster, as sort of an early garnish. I think it dates to around the very early 1800s. But again, several different suggested etymologies of the word.
So, thank you, Matt, for that. All right, Doug, do you know when and how did beer make it to the Americas?
Oh, it was brought over with the Pilgrims. Matter of fact, if you read the annals of the Pilgrims and why they stopped at Plymouth Rock, was not because they liked the place. They ran out of beer. Now you have to remember, beer was brought on ships for purified water. So it wasn't like, oh, well, we got all this water to drink and no beer. So we're quitting. We're going to stop here. That was, for the most part, their liquid. Plus it was a food also, so there was enough preservative from the beer and the hops that it would make it over. They could drink that. It also had food in it. So when they ran out of beer, essentially they ran out of water and bread.
No, I'll add on to that the British Navy, the history of British Navy rum, talks about how rum came into the mix, and it was one way was that they used to send out their ships with beer, and at that time all they had were wooden casks. There were no stainless steel containers. There was no sterilization. They weren't even aware of sterilization, and so they would send out the ships with beer, and they would and sometimes water, and they would basically drink first what was going to go bad first, and I guess beer would last several weeks or maybe a couple of months at most, but they would send it out with beer, and it would give sailors their daily ration, which could either be beer or water or wine. Sometimes they would also send out, but on these longer voyages, especially when they started traveling to the Caribbean, they would still at some point run out of beer or wine that hadn't spoiled, and they found that a distilled spirit like brandy and then later rum had enough alcohol in them to prevent them from spoiling indefinitely.
So rum is the winner. For sure. Finally, we got a point. Thank you, Matt. Thank you there.
I was going to add, at that point in time, the initial the per sailor daily ration was either a pint of rum, which would have been 16 ounces of high strength rum, or a gallon of beer every day.
Oh,
now, Matt, high strength. Now, back then, what was high strength versus for rum,
it would have been what they were able to come off the still at that point in time. They were in the 1700s. It was still very simple pot distillation. I think they were probably getting it up to around 75% ABV. And it's possible they may have diluted it before serving, but that was typically around it was around 75% ABV in that era. I don't know what strength the rum was at, but I know, for example, the British Navy had its own brewery where they made the beer, where they would go through so much supplies when they were sending these ships out that they had their own basically commercial bakeries, breweries, clothing manufacturers, everything. So they made a prodigious amount of beer and did so up until around 1832 or so.
And that's how. And then what about rum? How did rum make it to the Americas? Or like, when did that happen?
That's a good question. I don't remember the exact year, but it was certainly not. America was not far from the Caribbean. and the rum had spread, Barbados, Jamaica, Cuba, so on and so forth. But certainly by the mid 1700s, if not earlier, rum was coming from the Caribbean there. And of course, you had the triangle trade of ships from Europe going down to Africa, picking up slaves, taking them to the Caribbean, trading the slaves for Caribbean goods, for example, rum or molasses. Then they would oftentimes travel up to North America, basically to the U.S. and now Canada, travel up there, and oftentimes sell the rum or sell the molasses, and then head back to England. So sometimes a square trade, sometimes a triangle trade. But there were many years where like millions of gallons of molasses were sent up to North America, and primarily in New England. And so that, like, New England rum was once almost as common, or maybe just as much as places like Jamaica or Barbados. It was a major industry. It didn't actually die off until the early 1900s or so. But rum essentially, they could have brought rum up and sold rum, but the Americans were like, we'll just buy the molasses and make it ourselves. So, in that regard, you could say that rum was America's first spirit before whiskey.
100%. Well, that's what that is. And they said the growth of American whiskey happened right after the American Revolution, that the 13 colonies did not want to support anything else that the British were producing or bringing. And then we realized, right, that we have corn, we got barley, we got wheat, and we got water, and we got all the great ingredients to do alcohol, and we created our American whiskey.
Right, and that's part of it. Also, you could say that, well, with the westward expansion, that as we moved away from the East Coast and we basically went across the Appalachians, and we're getting into like Kentucky and Ohio, transporting all that molasses there to make rum there was a prodigious effort. And it's like wait, we can just grow grain here and make whiskey more. It was just more economical.
100%. Doug, I think this is a good moment right now. If you can showcase the cool beer that you have, and tell us a little bit more. I'm gonna put your screen real nice and big, because this is something that I think you do great on your live streams.
All right. Well, the first thing I'm going to do, and this is from Whistle Hop Brewery in North Carolina, and it was entrant into the North Carolina Craft Brewers Conference, which I was fortunate enough to snag. And it is in a Jamaican rum barrel. So I'm going to open this guy up and give it a try. But I thought everybody might be interested. 9.2%. And it has a very interesting characteristic to it. So I'm really looking forward to opening it. So I'm going to go ahead.
What I was seeing the images. There's some icons that explain. There's an image of a distillery, then a barrel. It says number 8. What is that? Was there 8 months, 8 days?
I don't know. I haven't looked at the barrel that closely.
The label, yeah.
Oh, the bottle. But I was just going to show everybody what a pretty bottle it was, and now I've got to get all that wax off of it so I can serve it. But it ought to be a beautiful pour. And so I'm going to work for just a moment to get that ready to pour. I had thought about cutting all that off, and I thought, no, that makes such a pretty pour. I should wait. Wow, that is it is good stuff. All right, I think we're going to have to bring out the knife. This is getting embarrassing. Why don't you take me off a full screen here, if you don't mind, Fede?
Absolutely.
And I'll tell you as soon as I'm ready to make the pour. But
yes, sir.
They got some tough wax here.
Well, Matt, as Doug gets prepared, maybe you can help us out, or we can talk about this next topic. Can you share three key moments in American history that rum has had a big impact on in our nation.
Okay, yeah, sure. The three that come to mind are, as I mentioned earlier, sort of the arrival of rum and molasses into the colonies in the 1700s, and like I said, American-made rum was a major part of that era. And there's stories of that George Washington ordered, as I think it was Jamaican rum or Barbadian rum, to be served at his inauguration, for example. So that's one. And then if we jump fast forward into the 20th century, we get to Prohibition, and we see that when it was illegal to make and sell distilled spirits in the United States, people still wanted it, and so they would start bringing in basically illegally importing. Bootleggers would illegally import rum, and lots of spirits, but the Caribbean was very close, and so a large amount of what they brought in over the era of Prohibition was in fact rum from the Caribbean. And then shortly thereafter, once Prohibition ended, and rum was now readily available from the Caribbean and very inexpensive at that point, it birthed the tiki movement. That tiki cocktails are by far the most dominant type of cocktail that uses rum, and there really is no rum without tiki. And so those are my three moments.
Thank you.
All right.
As you were
talking
we're ready.
About, Fede, that's got to be the toughest bottle I ever opened. So we will see if this doesn't do a nice pour.
It's looking yummy.
Oh, considering the alcohol that's in that guy, that's pretty good. I think I'll put that bottle on the other side so that the glass is closer to me. So it's a beautiful pour. See what that guy looks like. Now, the alcohol being 9.4%, you're not going to get a huge head there, but I got about an inch of head out of it. So, what characteristics do you think I should get from the rum barrel?
So you said it was a Jamaican rum that was used for it?
That's what the bottle says.
Yeah. So the traditional characteristics of Jamaican rum are what we would call funky. Some people describe them as very fruity, maybe overripe banana. It's one of those things that's hard to describe until you've had it for the first time, and then the moment you've had it, you go, now I understand what funk is. So it should a little just like I said, kind of fruity, kind of overripe, and just something that's like a little weird, for lack of a better word.
Yeah, what it reminds me of, and it's not exactly like this, but it's like muscadine, maybe. There's just my uncle had a muscadine vine in his backyard that he cultivated, and I just remember the aroma that came off of all the muscadines that were on the ground, and that overripe characteristic that's definitely there. Now, I was hoping to get a little more molasses than what I'm getting, but it's quite pleasant. This is a Scotch ale, as I understand it. He put a little bit of cherry smoked malt in it, and then it was finished out. And he said it was a second generation rum barrel.
Okay.
So, any thoughts on rum barrels and how many generations you could get out of them and still get some rum characteristics?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm not sure whether they mean like second generation as in that because most rum barrels themselves are ex-whiskey barrels, that the American bourbon barrels are what most rum is aged in. The vast majority of rum, as is the vast majority of Scotch whiskey, for example, is ex-bourbon barrels, which can only be used one time to make bourbon, are sold off. And a lot of them go to Scotland, a lot of them go to the Caribbean, where they age rum. And so that may have been the first use, and the second use may have been in Jamaica, or maybe it was used 2 times in Jamaica. And in terms of aging a spirit, a typical barrel will only go for about 20 years of use. So that, that could be 1 time at 20 years or 2 times at 10 years. It's really hard to know based upon what the label says.
Well, Jeremy put in there, he describes it maybe as sweetened compost.
Okay.
I'm not getting that.
Okay.
But I do get a little butterscotch.
Okay.
A little butterscotch.
Nice.
That's in there. But the interesting, the overripe fruit is interesting.
Mm-hmm.
That looks like our other guest is on screen or has joined us, Fede, if you want to invite Bartley.
Bartley's here. I just don't, his camera is not on. So if I add him,
I can.
I can't. So it doesn't even give me the option of bring him to the screen.
Okay.
He just logged out. He might logged in again. Well, we got Corey saying, yes, fun label. I love fun label transparency. I mean, I think he's talking about your beer. Doug, can you show the back label again, please?
Yeah. I'll zoom in on it. I'll go ahead and get as close as I can with the side camera. I can't do the overhead camera because it's not emptied yet. All right. So it shows 4 weeks in stainless, 8 weeks in barrels.
And oaken Jamaican rum barrels. Yeah. We don't know which ones though as well. Like different, and it makes a big difference what rum was in them, because Jamaican rum can be relatively tame or it can be off the charts. So we don't actually know.
Well, it's very nice. Again, I don't exactly know what characteristic to expect. And there is Mr. Bartley. I think his mic is off. I think it's on now. Speak. I hope.
Yeah. How's it on sound? Got sound?
All right.
Yes.
Well, welcome, Bartley.
We're in.
So, Bartley, I'll tell you where we are. We're in the process of talking about the Jamaican barrel-aged beer that I had. And I think you had one there from the brewery. Is that right?
Got a little background noise, but let me try.
All right. Well, I tell you what.
Try that.
There we go. That sounds much stronger.
Yeah, there we go. That's good. Okay. Yeah, I'm usually not very technically challenged. I don't know why this was so difficult for me to get this going, but enough said. We're here. I did hear a question, though, and some discussion about generations of rum barrels, and I'd definitely love to talk to that point. The can be pretty much used and to the point that was made, a lot of them are ex-bourbon barrels or whiskey barrels or something like that. Have a Dominican rum barrel right now that I have no idea how many times it was used, but it was definitely over 10 times, and the early eligible date was 53. So it's been used quite a bit.
As in
I'm actually using
1953?
it now to age. I'm sorry.
Bartley, did you say 1953?
53 years ago.
Wow.
And I'm using it to age gin.
Is that typical?
There's all sorts of different things you can use barrels for.
Is 53 years typical? I had no idea barrels were used that long. So is that typical, Bartley? I'm not sure he's hearing me.
think
So,
it's
Doug,
my
we
mic
do
is
have
still
bars.
breaking up a little bit.
We have like a Remy Control, the Louis 13, right? 100 years in a barrel, right? And then there's different types of spirits that are aged for decades.
Yeah, and it will often be moved between barrels. There's no guarantee that if you said something was aged for 50 years, that it was necessarily in the same barrels. And in fact, we know in Cuba that they use barrels a very long time. But basically, the older the rum is in the barrel, the more neutral they're going for. They're not looking to extract a lot of the wood flavors. They're more looking for what they call oxidative aging flavors.
Well, I think it's just fascinating. Anything wood could have a liquid in it for, even if they use it over and over again for tens of years. That's just, you think of things like stainless steel. I mean, nobody can hardly get a boat to last in the water that long, much less holding something with a volatile liquid in it.
Right.
100%.
Well, speaking of volatile liquids, I want to do an experiment. Is now a good time, Fede?
I think now is a great time.
All right. So, you guys know I like to try various things. And so I'm going to attempt to do something I've never tried. And we're going to play with fire during a live stream. But the only rum that I had, and you guys know I'm far more serious about, I guess, lighter beverages. But we had a bottle of Black Seal 151 that we use for cooking.
Mm-hmm.
And particularly flambeau type desserts. So a lot of people may not have ever seen an alcohol that's lit. And so we're just going to give it a try right quick. And so I'm going to switch to the side camera there, and we will get him in focus. And then I'm going to kill the lights after I pour some 151 in there. And my wife is standing by with the fire extinguisher. So there we go. And we won't let that burn too long, so we don't have to worry about it breaking. But again, this is what we're putting in there. Black Seal 151 proof.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'll put that behind there so you can see. And we'll kill the lights. Give it a little ambiance. And this is just a lighter like you might use for a grill. And sure enough,
there you go.
Nice.
We've got a pretty good flame there. I don't know if you can see it that well. I think you can.
Yeah. Now,
So,
if you really want to make it go big, one of the tricks people use is to actually pour the rum into like a crouton, for example. It kind of creates a wicking effect.
well, we're in my basement, so this is plenty.
Yeah. Okay. I come from a culture of tiki drinks where we're making giant flames and then actually sprinkling cinnamon on them to make them go even higher is part of the show.
Yeah. Dude.
So
I'm going to share something with you, Doug. I'm sure both Bartley and you have heard of the Dark and Stormy, right? The famous drink, Dark and Stormy. So
yes.
The official rum of the cocktail for the Dark and Stormy is the Gosling rum.
Yes, and not necessarily the 151 version, but
not
yes.
the 151. Yes, no.
Well, Bartley, do you distill anything that's gets up into the 151 stage?
Oh, I can't hear you, Bartley. We can't hear you. Are you you're properly connected? We can see you. No sign languages.
Bartley, you could just type in the chat. Just join the either the chat that we've got here in StreamYard, or what might be even easier is to do it in Crowdcast if you want to jump on there. but just stay on screen if you'd like. That would be great.
Yeah. There's
So those were the two main things that I wanted to do, Fede, is I did want to try this nice barrel-aged Scottish ale in the Jamaican rum barrels. And I wanted to see if it would light. And I knew, I was pretty sure. I wasn't sure I'd get that much flame out of it, though. I had to kill the lights completely because the alcohol flame tends to be invisible. So right. I don't know if you realize it or not, but that's a DSLR camera that's set for very low light. So it was, other than the light from the lighter, that was really dark in here. So
right.
It's pretty amazing, but it also gets roaring hot.
Mm-hmm. I do agree that you're putting the ambience. You had the rum. All you're missing about the Beach Boys song, like Bermuda, Bahamas. Oh, I wanna take. All right.
So I'll have to say, if we're talking about flammability, rum has to get the point for that one.
Yeah.
Because we can try all day long, that beer's not going to light.
That's true. Yes.
All right. And then, so let's talk about if someone's drinking beer for the first time, what's a good intro brand? Like, what's a good brand to tell them, hey, or an expression, or like, here, you should certainly start with this beer?
Well, it's a bit like wines or even ice cream or breads. There's a huge variety of beers that are out there that go from near flavorless to highly flavored. So kind of like ice cream, you've got to decide what flavor you like. Because if you don't like chocolate and you've never had ice cream before, you probably shouldn't try chocolate ice cream. Beer, if you're trying to ease into it and you just want to taste something that's fizzy and, limited color, the industrial beers that we're all familiar with, all pretty well. You were talking about being a lawnmower beer. There's nothing better than an American adjunct lager for, a lawnmower beer. Now, the next division really comes into, do you like beers that are malty, or do you like beers that are really more bitter or even citrusy and fruity in their characteristics? So the more malty beers, if people really like breads, and they know they like breads, sticking with the malty beers is a place to go. If they like citrusy fruits, then the hoppy beers, like the IPAs, are a great way to go. But that comes with a certain level of bitterness. And now what people are starting to see more and more are the New England IPAs, which has all the citrusy, almost juicy characteristics with very little of the bitterness. So, it's just a huge wide array of things. If the best thing to do is to talk to somebody who knows something about beer, let them ask a few questions to you, and they can take you right to the beer style that you will like.
You're right. You're completely right. And what do you think, Matt, about for rum? How would you, what would you recommend? Because there's a clear stigma of people in the U.S. Initially, we're all thinking about like the Captain Morgan and then our cheaper version of rum, and then everybody's like, no, I don't want to drink rum anymore because I had a horrible time in college.
Right. That isn't. So many people are like, oh, I don't like rum. I had a bad experience in college. Or they said, I had a bad experience with tequila, and they frame their expectations around that. Or they say, well, rum is some sugar, and I don't like sweet things. And we can explain that rum is not sweet coming off the still. So it's very similar to what Doug said, is that you might ask them a few questions, especially if they have experience with a distilled spirit, like if they're a bourbon drinker or a Scotch whiskey drinker or brandy drinker. You might ask them, what are you looking for? And even, or what do you like? And even you might say, if you're a beer drinker and you like those like super estery, sort of wild, wild fermentation beers, then even that might help you guide them to something they might like in the beginning. In the absence of all that, I would start with sort of a middle of the road rum that's not like super wild like a Jamaican or super grassy like an agricole. Nothing crazy. There's some very sort of good middle of the road, very enjoyable beers that rums that convince.
1 point for beer.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, a lot of good rum that convince like a bourbon drinker, and they go, "Wow, hold on a moment here, this is really good." And examples of that would be like from Barbados, would be like Mountain Gay, from Jamaica,
Like what?
like Mount Gay from Barbados.
Is that a brand?
It is a brand, yes.
Okay.
Actually, it's the oldest rum distillery in the Caribbean. So, Mountain Gay, or like Appleton State from Jamaica, or maybe like a good Puerto Rican rum, like not the very least expensive Bacardi, but something like a Bacardi 10 would be lovely. And I think lots of people love rum once you've given them the right rum to start with.
Well,
Yeah, I like to
man, I'm
introduce
glad you
people.
mentioned that.
Yeah.
Well, what I was going to ask was, I mean, we know in beers, and we can go with the industrial beers, and you can get, a 6-pack of those things for, in some cases, less than $5.
Right.
If you're getting craft beer, it'll at least be double that, maybe even half again. So, and there's a difference, huge difference in flavor and characteristics, and you're paying for that. So what do you look for? I've got this bottle of 151 that I use it primarily for a flambeau.
Right.
But what if I was going to buy something that was like a craft rum?
Right.
Besides Bartley's distillery, where else would we go?
So what I would say is that don't go to your supermarket. Don't go. You're going to find the Captain Morgans, the Bacardis, and there's nothing wrong with a Bacardi rum. It's just what they're going to sell at the supermarket is the very sort of low end of their range. And I'm saying you have to go a little bit higher up, and then you can get some really amazing things. So I believe there are plenty of good rums in the $30 to $40 price range, $30 to $50 price range. In fact, I've written articles of like the best rums under $35, or the best rum from each country under $45. So there's some great values out there, especially if you compare it to the bourbon market, where the prices are going up and up and up, and people expect to pay maybe $100 for a decent bottle, for a decent craft bottle. In rum, $40 or $50 will get you something of equivalent quality there. Like you said, it's hard to know, and it's hard. You don't necessarily want to look for the most elaborate label. It's more a matter of finding a rum loving person and saying, what brand should I look at? And there are some very good, well-known brands that any decent liquor store will have a variety of.
So if I went to my local Costco, which might be irritating to you, but they really have some fine stuff. And I were to pick out one of their rums, what is the characteristic that I would look for that said, okay, I bought this Kirkland brand rum. Do I think it's a good rum, or do I think it's like a low-end Bacardi? I mean, what characteristic do I look for? I
mean, one thing, like, so Fede wants to say something there.
Yeah, Matt, I believe Kirkland, the only Kirkland rum they sell is spice rum. I haven't seen a regular another. It's not that spice rum, but an unflavored rum from at Kirkland.
Right. Yeah. I mean, if you're looking at Kirkland brand, then it's going to be hard. I think it is a spice rum. They may also have a white rum. I'm not sure, but different costs, from what I've seen, different Costco's have different stock. And so, for example, I believe I've seen people have posted Foursquare rums from Costco. You can't necessarily assume it's nationwide, but every once in a while they have a really good rum at Costco that's worth having. So, but it's it's with rum. It's unfortunately a case of at the lower end. It's more a matter of knowing what to avoid. You don't want to, if you really want to experience rum, you don't start with a spiced rum. They're usually very sweetened, and you don't want to start with like a budget white rum. There are some amazing white rums, but you just have to kind of know which ones are the ones to seek out and which ones are the ones that are just what's the cheapest thing we can make and put on the shelf for the price conscious buyer.
Yeah, so because I would have assumed when you said spiced that it was like a winter ale. In the wintertime, there's a lot of beers, that pumpkin beers, those kind of things. They're not necessarily sweet. Matter of fact, generally are not, but they're spicy.
Right.
They'll have a lot of the same spices you have in a pumpkin pie.
Right.
So when you talk about a spiced rum, that's not quite the same thing. It's just not pumpkin pie spices in a rum.
Well, so the spices you'll find in a rum, the dominant spices you'll find are cinnamon and vanilla, and then you might see cloves, and so it is sort of like those autumnal, whatever the word is, autumnal spices. But the tradition of most mass market spiced rums is to sweeten them quite a bit. So for those you're talking about, Captain Morgan, the Kraken, Sailor Jerry's. Those are all they're sort of low end rums that have been spiced and sweetened. There are some very good spiced rums that I enjoy, for like Chairman's Reserve Spice from St. Lucia.
But Matt, I gotta say that if you only have $10 and you're gonna buy something and you bought a bottle of rum, that's hooray for you, right? Even though
I mean, it's good to yes, you should buy a rum, but like I said, I believe so many people are judging it based upon what's in your supermarket shelves, and those supermarket shelves are driven by the big brands who can bring in things at an incredibly low price. People don't realize that if you go up a couple dollars, suddenly the quality level jumps up substantially.
Yeah. Well, I'm also a mead judge, and of course the alcohol levels in mead don't approach what rum is.
Right.
But in a fine mead, it's not the least bit hot alcoholic. I mean, no fingernail polish, no solventy. It's just smooth, warm, sweet alcohol.
Right.
Is that the same thing you're getting in the higher end rums?
Yeah.
Sneaky alcohol levels.
Yeah, it really depends. Like some rums you really don't get a solventy note to. Some rums do. Oftentimes that solvent note is a thing called ethyl acetate, and that's a particular compound that's very common in distilled spirits because that's what it happens to come off the still at around the same temperature as what ethanol does. And so it's usually the most dominant ester you'd find in a rum. But over time in a barrel, for example, much of that ethyl acetate may transform into a more complex ester and turn into something like honey, like a honey note, for example. So it really depends on the beer, or I'm sorry, the rum. And like I said, there's
another one.
Yeah, I know, right? Certainly,
I'm counting.
I keep hearing beer. So no, there are certainly some rums that I name, but I won't right now, that you're like, yeah, they're a little solventy, and you kind of realize what it is. But there are other ones that are like, no, I don't have the solventy note at all, and those might be rums that are only $25 or $30.
But this 151, which you just saw me light, there is no hot alcohol in that. It smells spicy, little fruity, but it doesn't smell even solventy, I guess.
Yeah.
I mean, it just really, I wouldn't know it was 151 because in a beer, sometimes you can get some real heat off of it.
Right. And as I say, that particular rum is heavily colored. It's just not getting all of that color from the barrel. The vast majority of it is coming from caramel coloring. And we don't know, and I don't know if they may add molasses or some other sweetener. I don't actually know. I don't have the. There are some estimates, but that color that you're seeing there is not from the barrel. It's like if there is color to it from the barrel, it's 5% of that color.
Oh, really? So is that kind of a characteristic that you don't want? I mean, that if they're coloring it?
Yeah, so it's a controversial subject in rum, but essentially you can say that the darker the rum, like if it's a really dark rum, if it's something that they sell as a dark rum or something they sell as a black rum, the odds are that it's actually a fairly young rum that has a lot of E150 caramel coloring added to it. There you can find 20-year rums that were aged in sort of older cask and aged in Europe, and they're very pale. Like they might be the shade of a nice lager, and be very pale looking after 20 years of age. So, it's like, yes, the longer a rum is in a specific barrel, the darker that rum will become. But people often equate color with age, and that's often not the case.
It could be also based on the shard, right? How much the barrel is charred and burned.
No, that's a myth. That people think that's the case, but it's not actually the char level.
Doug, I do want to say something. Is that Matt was sharing that spice rums, they do add caramel, they do add vanilla, but at the same time, uninfused rum that has been aging for a period of time, they absorb a lot of different characteristics from the barrel. And some of those characteristics naturally are the scent of vanilla, the scent of caramel, the scent of different spices and fruits. So I just want to clarify that not every time that you smell a rum, it means that it was infused with vanilla or caramel. There is a natural aspect that came from the barrels.
And those same bourbon notes you get, like when you nose a bourbon, you'll get those vanilla notes and those vanilla and coconut. If you age a rum in a new American oak barrel, you'll get the same characteristics. Or if it's the first time a rum has been aged after one bourbon aging cycle, you may also get some of those vanilla and coconut notes from it.
Well, Fede, we're at the top of the hour. Should we take a look at some of our questions? I don't want to cut it short, but I know a lot of people just allow an hour. And
yeah, absolutely. Just go ahead and see which questions you have from your end. Okay.
So the first one is for Bartley, and unless Bartley can join us there in the chat, we may have to pass on that one. The next one's for you, Matt.
Okay.
So the question is, how about a Dark and Stormy, the classic Bermudan ginger beer and rum highball? Okay. Gosling's dark rum, ginger beer, and lime. So what can you tell us about that? The rum drinkers may be very familiar with it, but some of the beer drinkers, and that be me, are not that familiar with it.
Yeah. It's one of the sort of classic highballs made with rum. You'll find it, served in Caribbean bars, tropical bars. It's actually one of the first cocktails that I learned how to make. It's incredibly simple. It's really, depending on how strong you want it, it's about 2 ounces of rum in a glass. Gosling's has the trademark for Dark and Stormy, so they will tell you that you can only make a Dark and Stormy with Gosling's rum. 2 ounces of Gosling's rum, some ice. Some people say you don't have to add lime. I prefer it with just a squeeze of lime, not a whole lot of lime, like a squeeze of like a quarter wedge of lime, and then some ice, and then top it up with ginger beer. And it should be ginger beer, not ginger ale, because you really want the ginger beer is more sort of ginger forward in your face. So yeah, it's incredibly easy to make, and they go down incredibly quick.
Why the name Dark and Stormy? It has to do on how the view of the cocktail.
No, well, I mean, I think if the ginger beer is a little dark. It's like the dark rum. It creates the coloring of the cocktail is supposed to be evocative of a stormy sea. Dark clouds, things like that.
Yeah, Matt, you should do a Dark and Stormy as we're talking.
Yeah,
I don't have any ginger beer on me right now.
So what color does it? It doesn't come out as dark is
not that dark, and unless you have a really dark ginger beer, but it's fairly brown. It's more the color of it's a slightly darker color than what your ginger beer would be.
This is held up really well. Just let people see. I mean, the clarity on this guy is beautiful, and it's still holding a bit of a head. So it's a very nice beer. I'm glad I was able to grab that at the last competition.
Do you have any more questions?
What do you do with a 151 if you're not going to make dessert out of it? So what else can I do with this?
Yeah, so great question. The main thing is it's often used in many different tiki drinks. Some people will just use it as a float. Not that your drink's going to light on fire, but just like a 151 float will give you like a nice little, like dark head on a lighter drink. But many of the classic tiki drinks, like the 151 Swizzle, for example, are actually very simple drinks. It's like an ounce or an ounce and a half of 151, some lime juice, some Angostura bitters, and some simple syrup, and there's your cocktail right there. So a lot of tiki drinks use that very high strength 151 proof rum, and some of these drinks, like the rum barrel, for example, will have up to 4 ounces of rum in it, and some of that rum is 151 proof.
So do you make any desserts with it, Matt?
Oh, I thought you were asking Fede.
No, well, I'll ask whoever answer it. We were making Bananas Foster and Cherries Jubilee.
Right.
And have you ever made anything that's flambeau? That wasn't one of those two?
I have not used that for flambeing. I used to, like I said, some of these tiki drinks, they have, what I would call tiki fire. And the idea is that, you put it in a lime shell, I put a crouton in there, and you get a nice little like volcano bowl sort of effect out of it with like a tiki torch almost. But most these days, most tiki people have realized it's actually you get a better fire from using lemon extract. That's like that, because lemon extract is that high proof. People don't realize that, but lemon extract is around 160 to 180 proof. But it's also got a little oil in it, and so between that high alcohol and the oil, you can get a really nice flame out of it. In fact, I did a demonstration in my book. There's a couple pictures in my tiki book I wrote that have, here's 151 on fire, which looks kind of like what you did, and then here's lemon extract on fire, and the flame is at least 5 times larger there.
I've got some. I'm going to try it. I'm going to step away, Fede.
Yeah. Get some lemon extract, like put it on a crouton, put it in a bowl, and it's pretty crazy what you can get.
Give me a minute.
I want to share this picture. Like, look at that, beautiful. I think that's a beautiful Dark and Stormy right there.
Right.
I love it when you're able to separate the ginger beer from the rum. It's just, it's
and
really
that
nice.
They may have added a float as well. Like it may have some mixed in with the ginger beer, but then a float as well.
Yeah. And your Matt, through
what?
Well, you've always drank different type of spirits, and I've never heard you talk about or reading about beer, but I might be wrong, and that's why I like to ask you.
Yeah. So I enjoy beer. It's just it's a matter of I've fallen so much in love with rum and the tiki drinks that's pretty much what I like to drink most of the time. I certainly know there's a very wide market for beer out there, and that lots of my friends are beer fanatics, and all the little breweries and distilleries. I think part of it as well is that there's so many of them that I can't keep them all straight. Whereas at least with rum, it's like, okay, here's 50 distilleries, I can manage them. So I think Doug has some lemon extract.
All right, I want to see that.
Yeah, I do.
I'm
just going to read.
Does it say like alcoholic and flammable on it?
No, it doesn't. So I'm wondering if it does.
Yeah, it
It
usually.
just says pure lemon extract and lemon.
Okay, we'll try it. I mean, sometimes they use something other than alcohol to pull it out. Oh,
It does smell like alcohol, though.
okay.
All right, so everybody can see what I'm doing here. Because I want to be... There's no sleight of hand here. Let's see. All right, so there is the lemon extract. We poured a little bit in there. We'll kill the lights.
Put on the music.
And we will see what happens.
Oh, wow.
Well, what do you know?
Wow. That's very flammable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you notice you're getting more of the yellow flame. It's more visible. That when you do the high proof alcohol, it's more of a blue flame. It's basically pure, so you get more of the blue. Whereas the oil, it's the oil burning that's giving you more of the yellow flame here.
Super interesting. And it's cheaper to use the lime extract.
It actually,
way cheaper. Way cheaper.
Yeah, well, Bacardi 151 is maybe about the price of, well, they used to have a 151, but yeah, you can get very inexpensive 151s or Everclear, but yeah, if you buy your lemon extract in bulk, and don't buy it in 2-ounce bottles, buy it in bulk, it can be pretty cheap.
Yeah, Doug, how come you have?
I got this at Restaurant Supply, and I think it was $5.
Well, that's
maybe
a great price for that. But yeah. If you're so inclined, maybe next time put a piece of bread in the bowl and then put it on there. It'll be even more impressive.
We'll have to do one on flammable liquids, flammable drinks.
Yes.
I can see that shaping up now.
Yeah.
Well, that was pretty unexpected, Matt. I'll have to say you get the prize for the biggest surprise.
Well, thank you.
Well, Doug, I think, and Matt, I think we can call it for the night or for the day. I really appreciate your time. I don't know if, Doug, if there's any more questions from your end. From our end, we don't have any.
Yeah, that looks like there has been one added from Stuart. So if you're good with that, we will get that one answered.
Absolutely.
Okay. And can Matt or Fede talk about the source of funk in some rums? I've heard mention of dunder or tillage. What kinds of yeast or bacteria, Brettanomyces, might be contributing to that?
This is Matt. This is Matt. Bread and butter here.
Yes. So some of the words he's using are commonly used in Jamaican rum. Jamaican is sort of the flagship for a funky rum. A more modern, the way most rums are made today, a very modern process, is that you would take the molasses, you would dilute it, put it in a vat, dilute it down to, I think, 15 brie, I forget the exact brie level, but you dilute it, and then you would add a prepared commercial yeast, the similar yeast to what you might use to make Scotch whiskey, for example. Whereas with Jamaican rum, one thing they do is that not all distilleries do this, but ones that specialize in making these funky rums, is that they will actually just use the wild yeast in the air. There's so much natural yeast in these distilleries that they will just spontaneously ferment on their own. So that's one aspect of it. And then the second aspect of it is that instead of diluting with water, sometimes they will actually dilute it with what they call dunder. And dunder sounds really weird, but it's really just stillage. It's what was left in the still from the prior rum. So it's essentially it's watery, it's dark, it's got a lot of acid in it. Basically, the acids remain; they didn't pass out of the still, and so it's a highly acidic. And when they put that into the wash or into the mash that they're going to ferment, those acids in there combine with the alcohols that are also in there that are being formed during fermentation, and those alcohols and those esters together create esters. And I know beer people like to talk about esters, and it's the same idea. Is like an ester is an alcohol, one type of alcohol, one type of acid. They combine. Each ester has its own particular flavor profile. So that's something they do, and it's not unique to that sort of reusing your stillage from the prior run is not unique to rum. We actually see that in bourbon. It's essentially the same idea as sour mash bourbon. It's using some of your bourbon stillage in your next mash or in your next mash, which you then ferment. And then there's things like when he mentioned Brettanomyces, that's one of those things that's used in beer, and there's been experiments with that, with modern experiments with that, and they suspect that it may have also been used back hundreds of years ago when they were first sort of originating this concept of very high ester funky Jamaican rum. So it's essentially Jamaican rum, and this funk comes from several different factors, but they're all around jacking up the number of esters created during fermentation.
So did you say what tillage was, or did I?
I think he may have meant stillage. So stillage,
okay.
Yeah. So stillage, or in French they would call it vinasse.
And what is it? So if it's stillage instead of tillage.
So let's imagine you were going to make Scotch whiskey. You would take your beer and you'd put it in a still and you would distill it, and basically it would the vapors would pass out, but you don't distill it until there's nothing left in the still. There's going to be some watery stuff left behind. That's sort of like, it's like the waste. It's sort of like you might run it down the drain, spread it on a field. You shouldn't throw it in the ocean, but they should do that. But it's essentially that, like the part of the mash. I'm sorry, the fermentation of the wash that didn't actually boil through the still, so it's just left there in the still, and it's basically it's watery but with a lot more acid, and so they basically use that as the water source when making the next run.
And that's not the tail.
No, it's not the tails.
That's not the tail.
Yeah, tails would have had to have gone through the still. This is what's just left in the still before, because
I assume it's not sludgy. It's just this.
It can be. Maybe I haven't seen a lot of it up close in my life, but the pictures I have, it can be kind of sludgy, but it's not. It's not like molasses from what I've seen and understand.
I bet it doesn't look like this.
No, it does not look like that. No, it's usually very. There's conflicting sources about whether it's fairly light or whether it's fairly dark. All the pictures I've seen from modern Jamaican distilleries that are using dunder, it's pretty dark.
Well, I know Fede, you've been trying to wrap up, so I think what I will say on the beer side of things, that the rum characteristics add some wonderful flavors through primarily barrels in the beer world, and certainly I've had a part of a glass full right here of a delicious Scottish ale that has benefited from the rum barrels, which you were saying, Matt, and I didn't realize this, were probably at one time whiskey barrels.
Right.
And it sounds like it could be tens of decades old. I mean, what was it? Bartley was throwing around 53 years.
Right.
I had no idea barrels could be around that long. So I will have to say, we were talking about generations. My experience has been with barrels and beer is the more generations the barrel has been away from the distilled product, the less that characteristic is in there. So bourbon barrels in particular, I find the bourbon characteristics too high in a first or second generation beer that's in it, or the length of time they leave it in there. But as they get in that third and fourth generation, it adds a nice sweetness to it. So rum is great. I will have to explore some new things, and now I have a whole new way of doing flambeau.
There you go. Yeah, you probably don't want to drink. You probably don't want to drink your bananas Foster with that, though. It's going to be overpoweringly lemon.
Yeah, and I was looking at somebody, let's see, it was Eric was asking, how did it smell? It is a little bit like burnt lemon. It is not as unpleasant as that, but there's a little hot something in it and some lemon. So it's not bad. So it would not, but like you said, I'm not sure it would be perfect for Bananas Foster.
Right. And I'll just add really quick, there is actually some rum that are aged in beer barrels, actually.
No kidding.
Yeah, I'm drawing a blank on the one that comes to mind. I'm sure there are several, but one that comes to mind was Wicked Dolphin in Florida. They had a I think it was they called it a cigar barrel or something like that, but they definitely had a beer barrel aged rum.
And so the other question is going the other way. So if someone who is like me and the only rum they have is 151, and we were to decide to go to Costco, I like to shop at Costco, at least if I don't know what to pick out, and I were to pick out their Kirkland spiced rum, what I heard Fede say is it's apt to be a bit sweet, but maybe some of the same characteristics that I'm used to in like a winter ale.
Yeah.
That close?
Yeah, a spiced rum, like the Kirkland spiced rum, for example, is going to have that same winter spices in it.
Okay. And the other question, I haven't heard you, Matt, talk pirate. You hadn't said a R anywhere through this. And we're talking a pirate strain, aren't we?
Well, it's one of the big myths of rum is that it was all about the pirates, and we're trying to sort of educate people that, like, yeah, there were some pirates with rum, but it was not anywhere near the level that it got portrayed as. In fact, I think one of the first references was like Robert Louis Stevenson in like 1880 or something like that. It was not, in all of my historical research, I rarely do I come across pirates in the discussion.
Captain Drake.
Well, gentlemen, this has been a lot of fun. I know I've gotten a lot of positive comments there in the audience. They're saying thanks. And so I think it was a lot of fun. So cheers to you, gentlemen. I'll get over here where you can see it.
Yes.
Absolutely. Well, one thing really quickly, if you go to Costco and they have Bacardi, which is great too. They have the Kirkland and spice rum. Something that's very simple to mix is always this, like rum and Coke, right? This is something very basic, right? But it's always, and if you try with a Mexican Coca-Cola, it's really good because it doesn't have all that corn syrup in it. But then another great drink is rum and coconut water, right? Which is one of the things that we love to drink in Puerto Rico. It's always very refreshing all the time.
Doesn't the Mexican Coca-Colas, they have actually cane sugar in it, right?
Yeah, that's why the Mexican Coca-Cola that's sold in Costco too is with sugar cane, which is phenomenal. They were saying that Siesta Key rum also does a rum aged on beer barrels.
Mm-hmm. Well, and then, actually, that raises another good question. So I've always wanted to make a rum raisin ice cream.
Oh, yes. Delicious.
And if I wanted to get a really strong rum flavor, what would I go for? What am I looking for?
Well, the Gosling rum is phenomenal. And they have the Gosling rum, dark rum, which is the one for the Dark and Stormy. That has a lot of flavor. Of course, you also have different Venezuelan, Dominican rums like Diplomático, Rum Barcelo. They do the dark onyx. It's delicious. It's like very rich. But it's whatever you have. It's like you always got to think, like, if I'm in a deserted island and this is what I have, let's enjoy it, right? So and make the best out of it.
I just didn't know if you were seeking out a particularly rum.
Yeah, I mean, I would say if you want a sort of a rummy flavor and you wanted to harken back to maybe like the way rum punches tasted 100 years ago, a Jamaican, for example, Plantation Zamaca or Smith & Cross is going to have that very rummy flavor to it. And so, yeah, and those are, won't be available at your Costco likely, but any decent liquor store will probably have them.
Yeah. Well, Total Wine has a phenomenal portfolio of rum, which is great. Something that caught my attention is Costco now has here in Washington has an amazing selection of beer. They never have craft beers, and now they remove all, like, we're talking about like 6 shelves all from side to side, and which is phenomenal. Now Costco does a great job. They do, all their spirits are phenomenal. Their wines, their rum, so it's good. Sometimes they bring better rums, and hopefully that keeps on growing, and we are able to have access to more aged rum in Costco.
Yeah.
A lot of fun. Our audience is saying, Tom says, yep, thanks to all the presenters. Thanks, all good info. Thanks, everyone. Jeremy saying that. Stuart is saying that. It's cut off at the top, but I see an X. Henry says, excellent. So, and Jeremy says he likes El Dorado. I'm not sure I know what that is, but.
That's a rum from Guyana.
Very good rum. Yes. And we want to thank everybody here on our end. Corey's always participating in all our events and super active. And I appreciate everybody else who has joined us. Stay safe. I'm going to share here one more, our flyer of today. And then thanks, everyone. Be safe.
Cheers.
Cheers. Cheers.
Cheers.